Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk about 6 things I really hate about living in Paris. I have made similar videos a few months ago, which I'm going to link here somewhere. So that video will be part 1, so this video is part 2. When I watched my previous video, I realized that I forgot to mention the thing that is the most obvious, which I am pretty sure everyone notices even when they come only to visit the city, and it is the fact that people are really rude and stressed. And probably that goes pretty much together. When you live in the city, you understand why. First of all, French are not known in general everywhere in France to have a positive attitude. We love to complain about things. So everywhere in France, you won't see people smiling all the time and have a positive attitude. But in Paris, it's on another level because of the city itself. For tourists, it is a beautiful touristic city. For people who live in the city, it is stressful because it is very packed, because there is a lack of nature in the city. The transportation are not the best. Many people work far from where they live, so they are stressed all the time since they have to be very careful with their time. I talked about those things in particular in my previous video in detail. If you do not know why the city is so crowded and packed, then check out my previous video. But where it is the most obvious, in my opinion, is on the transportation, in the metro in particular, and in restaurants. So in transportation, it is because people are in a rush. As I said, they work very often far from where they live. They have to take the metro. If the metro is late, they will miss the train in order to go to the city where they live. If they miss that train, they will be late to pick up the kids. So that's complicated, and most of the time this metro and transportation are packed. Often they are late because of technical issues. So obviously if you are a tourist, it's not a big deal, but when you're not, it can easily become a big deal. In restaurants, that's a little bit different. That's where you see the negativity mentality of French people. In the restaurants, in my opinion, it is simply because French people are rude, they are not the most respectful. And in Paris, in many restaurants, obviously, you have many tourists. And even people who are not tourists in the city, they tend to eat out a lot compared to other French cities, because they are stressful, because they live in small places. So the little pleasure that we have in Paris is to go outside and eat often. So those restaurants, they always have clients, whether they are French people or tourist people. So it seems like the waiter don't make that much effort. And also in France, people don't give tips. I mean, it's not mandatory, it's not a thing. So there is no incentive for the waiter to be nice to you in order to have a tip. Although you shouldn't need a tip, just to be polite with a client. But that's how it is. I think the only place where you can go and not see that type of attitude with waiter are in luxury restaurants. And I mean the real luxury places, not the trendy Instagram places. Because in those luxury places, people for sure rent to what we call in France hotellerie, schools. So they really learn how to put the client first when they work. The second thing I hate about living in Paris are the sidewalks, for several reasons. The first one, they are way too narrow in most part of the cities. So let's say in the morning you take your time to get ready to go to work, you put your perfume, you took your shower, you smell great, and then you have to walk on the sidewalk in order to go to the metro station. But on the way, if it is the day where the garbage people have to take, the garbage, obviously in the city, the garbage, the huge one, will be put on the sidewalks. And there is nothing you can do about it. But when you have to walk, it is annoying because you have to try to avoid the garbage bin. And in the morning, when you smell good and you are fresh, then you have to smell all those garbage bin. And every time I think, can't we find another way? Because this is very typical of Paris. In my hometown in south of France, that is not the case because the city are built differently. So that's one thing about the sidewalks. But the other thing also is that they are not built straight, like they are not flat. There is always, I could call them hills or holes or stones or anything. There is always something that make it difficult to walk on it if you are on heels. And that's also the reason you don't see that many French women wearing heels in the city, unlike what you could expect. And I talked about that on my video where I talked about the things that French women never wear. And that's one of the reasons. It's not practical at all. And if you have a stroller or if you are on a wheelchair, I don't know how you do it on an everyday basis. Last spring, my sister visited me with my baby niece. I mean, she's not a baby, she's a toddler, but she was lazy, she was exhausted about Paris. And there was one day that I spent with her, just my niece and me, and we just spent time in the neighborhood. But since she didn't want to walk, I put her on the stroller in order to go to the park. And it was a struggle. I realized that the sidewalk was also annoying for strollers. It was a walk out just to go to the park, which is not that far. So yes, the sidewalks are a nightmare. The third thing I hate about living in Paris are the terraces of restaurants. And it is linked to the sidewalks. So, as I said, in France, I mean, no, not in France, in Paris in particular, the sidewalks are super tiny. People in Paris love to go to the restaurant. And when it is a little bit sunny, we like to be outside as much as possible since the city is not really sunny. So the restaurants, they always try to have some tables outside. But the sidewalks are tiny. Close to the sidewalks, you have the roads with cars. On the sidewalk, depending on the day, you also have a garage. On the terraces, on those sidewalks, it is allowed to smoke in France. It is not allowed in the restaurants, but on those terraces, it is allowed. And that is something I never understood about the city. I remember the first time I came to Paris, it was 24 years ago, so I was 15, and I was walking with my sister and I saw all those restaurants with those tiny terraces which had a view on the street with the smoke of the cars, with the smoke of people smoking, with the noise of the cars, but people were happy, people were smiling. And I was like, why do you pay to be on these tiny sidewalks? Like, why it's so uncomfortable? That's how it is in Paris. Obviously, there are some places where you can find a terrace that does not have a view on the street, but it is rare to find. But still, Parisians enjoy it. That's a Parisian thing to be on the terrace with your cafe or with your lunch, with people smoking around you, with a street in front of you. And that's how it is. It's Paris. You just have to deal with it. We can't change and transform the city. Even after many years living in the city, I hate those terraces. The fourth thing that I hate about the city, and maybe hate is too much of a big word, but I must say I was very disappointed, and I'm still very disappointed about that, is the fact that the restaurants are not nice. I mean, they don't look good. You imagine Paris as being the place for fashion, that the design inside the restaurant would be nice, but that's not really the case. I often find that people do not make effort to make their restaurants look nice inside. Many restaurants look like regular brasserie, and for tourists that may be cute, but for me that is not. Now you have brasserie in France which are old and they have a specific old Parisian design, which is nice, but then there are random restaurants slash brasserie which doesn't look good at all. I mean, they could be looking more modern, and even if they still wanted to keep the brasserie design, it could be made better, but that is not the case. And it is pretty much the same in France, but for Paris, to me, it is more disappointing because you expect, Paris to be nicely designed everywhere, and that is not the case. Although I must say that I have noticed those past years an improvement in the way the restaurants are designed, especially the new ones which are created by younger chefs. And I'm pretty sure that the reason is that they realize that people use a lot of social media now to find a place to eat. And on social media, we love things which look good. So a restaurant that look good and which make food which also look good will have more clients. So I see an improvement, but in terms of nice looking restaurants, London, Hong Kong, New York, they are so far ahead compared to Paris. We still have a very long way to go. The fifth thing that I hate about living in Paris is still linked to restaurants. And it is the fact that it is not that easy to find affordable French restaurants which are good. In Paris, you will find many affordable restaurants which often are called brasserie, but many of those restaurants do not sell fresh food. A part of their food, if it is not all of their food, are frozen. And if you don't cook or if you're not French, you may not realize that. But since I am French, I am used to French food, I am used to homemade food, and I know how to cook it. I know when it is not freshly made. And there are way too many French restaurants who do not make the food in the restaurants. And again, it is more disappointed about Paris because it is the city of food. It is the city that represents French food to the world. But still, it is complicated to find an affordable, good, homemade restaurant which sells French food. Very often when I have friends from abroad who come to Paris, if they don't ask me where to go for food, they are disappointed about the food. So I always tell them, please go at least to this and this and this restaurant and you will see the difference. And they always tell me, oh my God, thank you for the list because those places were so good. Like we were able to enjoy real, good, freshly made French food, and they could tell the difference with the random restaurants that they picked while visiting the city. So yeah, that's bad. And I remember that a few years ago there were restaurants chefs who wanted to create a label for French restaurants which were making all the recipes, all the meals from scratch in the restaurant in order for us to make the difference between those restaurants and the other ones. But this request to have this label did not go through because there are way much more restaurants who do not make their food from scratch. So they had the final word because in terms of number, they simply win. So if you visit France, and especially if you visit Paris and you have French friend, ask them where you should eat. You will thank them. I am done about the 5 things I hate about living in Paris. If you have visited this city, let me know about the things you hate about this city, and also let me know the things you hate about the city you are actually living in. I love to see conversation in the comment section and I reply to all of them. Thank you for watching and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye.